Hey Toku Faithful! Well, in case you didn't hear, Hideaki Anno's latest update on a classic tokusatsu series, Shin Kamen Rider, was recently shown here in the States. Twice. Though you wouldn't know that unless you are a die-hard fan and looked it up online, because Fathom Events barely plugged this movie. Hell, they waited darn near to the very last minute to put up the info on their website. Or drop a trailer. I'm disappointed in them because they kinda did the same thing to Shin Ultraman a few months back. But if it's something like a classic movie or a Hayao Miyazaki film, they can't plug it fast enough. But I digress. Shin Kamen Rider is yet another update to an older Japanese series. In this case, the original 1971 Kamen Rider series. Again, like Shin Ultraman, they took the bare basics of the origin story and updated it to modern times with some changes. Some significant, some not so much. The basic story here remains the same from the series. Young motorcycle enthusiast Takashi Hongo is kidnapped by the clandestine organization Shocker and turned into a grasshopper cyborg. Here, of course, they call them augments, or augs for short, until he's saved by Professor Midorikawa and his daughter Ruriko. Takashi is convinced to use his newfound abilities to stop Shocker and save the world as Kamen Rider Ichigo. Hongo is more or less the same as his 70s counterpart here, as he's trying to process the changes to his body and how he's going to go on living. They also gave him sort of a tragic backstory, which kinda makes him feel like every other run-of-the-mill American superhero. I don't think he really needed that, but that's just me. He's a bit more mopey as opposed to his stoic persona from the 70s. He's upset, but not emo to an insane degree, thank God. Ruriko, the professor's daughter, helps him along. They sort of gave her character more to do in this movie as opposed to being a damsel in distress from the original series who just tags along for a while and then disappears. Here she knows the inner workings of Shocker and usually comes up with plans to stop the villains. Also, unlike her 70s counterpart, she comes off real cold and is kind of a bitch toward our hero. But she gets her moments of being a badass as well. They're joined by two intelligence/government agents who try to help them take down Shocker. Speaking of Shocker, let's talk about the updated villains, shall we? This time, instead of being formed by Nazi remnants and other fascist groups, Shocker is designed to bring the world happiness through science, by killing humanity. Basically, Shocker wants to turn all humans into virtual ghosts, living souls but clinically dead. It's kinda hard to describe here, you just gotta see it for yourself. The villains that Ichigo faces, such as Spider and Bat, more or less resemble their original counterparts. But some, like Scorpion and Wasp, were changed to be more different and outlandish. Again, you gotta see for yourself. Ichigo fights each one on the way to get to the head of Shocker, who has a deep connection to Ruriko. Along the way, he runs into a second grasshopper Aug, Hayato Ichimonji. Without spoiling too much here, one thing leads to another, and Hayato joins Hongo in the fight against the head boss of Shocker. One major problem that I have with this movie is that there's an accompanying manga that explains several character backstory in greater detail, but not in the movie. If this was a continuation manga that happens after the movie, then fine, but not before or during. Several plot elements and character motivations are either left out or glossed over in this movie. I may be alone on this, but I think leaving plot points to a manga you may or may not be even able to read, especially if you're in the States, is very frustrating. It's like having to read a bunch of Marvel's new comics before you have to watch the new MCU movie. If you don't, you'd be completely lost. The fight scenes were good, and it felt refreshing to see a Kamen Rider use his motorcycle in battle again. I almost forgot what that looked like. Thank you, Japan's strict bike laws. I also like how the villains die the same way they do in the original series. You probably know what I'm talking about. It's very silly. There's also several Easter eggs, homages, and callbacks to Shotaro Ishinomori's other works sprinkled throughout the movie. If you saw it like I did, you probably know what I mean. Some are very on the nose, some not. Okay, now I'm getting into the big time spoiler territory. Tune out now if you haven't seen the movie yet. The first thing that sets this apart from the last one is that this was rated PG-12. It shows because this movie is very brutal. The red stuff flies and the bodies hit the floor. This Shin Kamen Rider may even be more violent than this Shin Kamen Rider. And that had a frickin' fatality in it. You know the one. Let's just say our hero can sort of go into a berserker rage that he can't control. Anyone or anything that gets in his way gets wrecked. Turning Ruriko into a sort of living AI was an interesting contrast to her 70s counterpart. I like how they develop her character as they go, and we see she's not such an ice queen as we initially perceived. It's evident when we see the videos she left behind for Hongo. She also proves this by curing Ichimonji of his brainwash. So deep down, she is a good person in the end. Ichimonji, unlike Hongo, is more outspoken and a bit of a loner. much like his 70s counterpart. He also kind of just appears with little to no build-up and just goes along with it. Personally, that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. And then there's the big bad, Ichiro, aka Kamen Rider Zero. As we discover, he and Ruriko are brother and sister. Sort of. Ichiro was a living person, and Ruriko was artificially created in a lab. We see that Ichiro's whole motivation for killing humanity is his mom died. Honestly, I think they shouldn't have made the big bad a freaking shocker sympathetic. It's a trope I'm getting very tired of in all kinds of pop culture. It's the same thing they tried to do with Negan on The Walking Dead. The guy is an irredeemable psychopath who kills people for fun, and then they try to make him look sympathetic and likable. Some bad guys are just bad. Whatever happened to the guys who just wanted to watch the world burn? Stop making every bad guy sympathetic. Sorry, getting off track. It's also the same reason that I don't think Hongo needed a tragic backstory about his daddy dying in the line of duty. The ending was a surprise because they took a gamble and followed the original manga story as opposed to the series. Namely, killing Hongo off and having Ichimonji become his successor. I thought that was a pretty ballsy move, and I've heard rumblings that Hideaki Anno may have sequels in mind for this movie. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. I also like how they revealed the agents were Taki and Tachibana, two of Kamen Rider Ichigo and Nigo's closest allies. Nice touch. The post-credits montage was also great. It had several of us in the theater singing along with the theme to Kamen Rider. What a great time to be a Toku fan. So, final analysis. Shin Kamen Rider has its ups and downs. I think they changed just enough to bring it to modern times while keeping the longtime fans happy. The pacing is good, the story is mostly solid, and the soundtrack is a wonderful mix of old and new. As I mentioned before, I wish they had explained some things better and not left it in a prequel manga, but that's a minor nitpick. Is it better than Kamen Rider the first? That's debatable. Then again, I've seen the first several times and I've only seen this movie twice. At least Shin did not have any pointless subplots to get in the way of the story. That is one plus I will give this. Much like he did for Ultraman, Hideaki Anno nailed the tone of the original vision of the creator, and it'd be interesting to see what he does next. I think it's a wonderful tribute to Shotaro Ishinomori's work, and then some. For now, I give Shin Kamen Rider a B-. The only thing holding it back from a higher grade were some things I mentioned earlier under the spoilers. I'm glad I got to see this on the big screen and converse with other Toku fans. Shout out to my buddy Jet Cosplays who went the extra mile and cosplayed for the film. Now that's dedication. Hopefully we'll get a Blu-ray release over here like Shin Ultraman is getting. And wouldn't you know it, just as soon as I finished making this review, they announced that Shin Kamen Rider will drop on Amazon Prime July 21st in over 200 countries. So it's safe to say you'll be able to see this movie before you know it. So what more can I say? Check it out when you get the chance. Shin Kamen Rider, it's one hell of a ride.